Ash fell like black snow. The colony's capital, once a jewel of steel and glass, now lay in ruins. Towers leaned at broken angles, their jagged silhouettes clawing at a blood-red sky lit by distant orbital fire. Streets that once thrummed with markets and laughter now echoed only with the crackle of flames and the buzz of scavenger drones hunting the last survivors. And in the middle of it all, a child stood alone. She couldn't have been more than 7 by human reckoning. Her skin shimmered faintly violet in the smoke, and her eyes, huge and silver, searched the ruins with a hollow, frightened desperation. Bare feet scraped against shattered glass, leaving tiny cuts that bled purple. In her small hands, she clutched a pendant on a frayed chain, holding it close to her chest, as if it were her last tether to life. The scavenger drones noticed her. Their wings whined like bone saws as they circled lower, scanning with beams of blue light. One let out a metallic screech, calling its pack. The child stumbled backward into the shadow of a half-collapsed archway, pressing herself against the stone, whispering words in her own tongue that trembled like prayer. Then a sound that didn't belong: heavy boots, crunching glass. A silhouette stepped out of the smoke, a human soldier. His armor was scorched, his rifle ready, his face streaked with ash. Corporal Elias Ward had been separated from his unit when the bombardment began. He should have kept moving. Orders were drilled into him. Survive, regroup, don't stop for stragglers. But his gaze fixed on her. The child's silver eyes widened in terror. She pressed flat against the wall, clutching her pendant tighter, convinced this was the end. Every alien in her short life had told her humans were dangerous, ruthless, killers. Elias lifted his rifle, scanning the rooftops. He saw the drones. They were closing in fast. His finger twitched on the trigger. He could blast them, maybe clear the way. But the little girl stood in the crossfire, trembling like a leaf. He made his decision. Slowly, he lowered the rifle. He knelt down, one knee crunching glass, bringing himself to her eye level. The soldier reached into a pouch and pulled out a ration bar, its wrapper reflecting orange firelight. He held it out in an open hand. The child blinked, frozen. A beat passed. The whine of approaching drones grew louder, closer. Elias's heart hammered. "Take it," he whispered under his breath, though he knew she couldn't understand. His hand didn't waver. Finally, hesitantly, her small fingers reached forward. She snatched the ration and bit it with desperate hunger. For a moment, amidst the chaos, there was silence. Then thunder split the sky. Not weather. Orbital bombardment. The ground shook violently as explosions rippled across the city. Whole blocks vanished in gouts of flame. The child stumbled, and Elias caught her by the arm before she fell. She looked up at him, her silver eyes filled with confusion, and something else. Hope. The drones shrieked overhead. They'd found them. Elias gritted his teeth. His orders screamed at him. Leave her. Move. Instead, he scooped the girl into his arms, rifle slung to his shoulder, and sprinted into the maze of ruins. Behind him, the city collapsed in fire and thunder. Above, unseen eyes watched. Predators weren't the only ones interested in the pendant she clutched. But for now, there was only a soldier carrying a child through the end of the world. The ruins groaned like a dying beast. Towers leaned on fractured supports, sending showers of debris crashing to the streets below. The air reeked of burning plastic and scorched metal, thick enough to choke. Elias Ward ran through it all, the alien child cradled against his chest. Every footfall rang like a death knell. He could almost feel the drones triangulating his position. His visor blinked with warnings: radiation, hostile signatures, structural collapse imminent. Orders drummed in his mind: don't stop, don't risk it, don't carry extra weight. But when he looked down at the small form in his arms, trembling yet silent, he knew there was no turning back. The child clutched the ration bar against her chest as if it were sacred. Crumbs smeared across her lips, but her wide silver eyes never left Eliza's face. She didn't understand his words, but she understood this. He hadn't left her. A scream ripped the sky. Elias skidded to a halt beneath the remains of a toppled sky bridge. Overhead, a scavenger drone dove. Its metal carapace gleamed, wings outstretched like serrated knives. Red targeting beams painted the rubble around them. Damn it. Elias ducked, spinning behind a column. He pressed the child against his chest, shielding her as blaster fire tore chunks from the wall. Heat licked his armor, close enough to burn. The girl whimpered, burying her face in his shoulder. Elias's pulse thundered. He shifted her weight, braced the rifle one-handed, and leaned just enough around the column to return fire. Blue bolts cracked the air, searing through the smoke. One shot caught the drone square in its wing. Sparks cascaded, and the machine screeched as it spiraled into a building. The explosion rocked the street, dust billowing in waves. No time to celebrate. Others were coming. Elias bolted into a side alley. The ground rumbled again. Another orbital strike slammed into the horizon, throwing up a mushroom cloud that turned the sky crimson. Shards of glass rained down like knives. The girl clung tighter, whispering in her language. The words were small, desperate, like someone begging a story not to end. Elias ducked into the husk of a collapsed market. Shelves lay overturned, their contents ash and shadows. He crouched low, adjusting the child so she could sit against his leg while he scanned the perimeter. Her pendant slipped from her hand, catching the light. For a split second, Elias's breath caught. The glyphs etched on its surface shimmered faintly. Not just jewelry, something else, something dangerous. The girl reached for it quickly, clutching it tight, as if afraid he might take it. Her silver eyes flashed not with fear this time, but with defiance. Elias exhaled slowly. "You're more than you look, kid." Before she could respond, the wall behind them shook with another impact. Debris cascaded, dust choking the air. A faint red glow seeped through crack stones, sweeping in tighter. Elias knew what command would say. Abandon. Prioritize survival. Instead, he shifted the child onto his back, securing her with the straps of his gear. She clutched his shoulders, small fingers digging into the fabric. He raised his rifle, jaw set. "All right then," he muttered. "We run together." He charged through the far side of the market, blasting open a half-collapsed door. Sunlight weakened, fractured through smoke spilled across his armor. Behind him, drones screeched, metal wings tearing the air. Ahead, the path forked. One road led deeper into the ruins, the other toward the shadow of the spaceport, its towers fractured but still standing. He didn't hesitate. He sprinted toward the port. The girl on his back lifted her head, eyes fixed on the rising fire behind them. She didn't know this human, didn't understand his words, but for the first time since the bombardment began, she whispered in halting human speech, "Safe." Elias froze for just a fraction of a second. Then he ran harder than ever. The city was no longer a city. It was a labyrinth of fire and shadow, collapsing towers leaning like the bones of giants. And somewhere above, mechanical shrieks cut through the roar of distant bombardments. The scavenger drones were closing in. Elias sprinted through a canyon of rubble, the alien child gripping his shoulders as he vaulted over broken walls. Every breath seared his lungs. Every step echoed against the ruins like a beacon for hunters. A harsh spotlight cut across the street. Elias dove into an alley, landing hard against the cracked pavement. A beam swept just inches above them. The child whimpered, clutching the back of his armor, her tiny frame trembling. Elias's visor flared with warnings. For hostiles inbound, range, close. The drones weren't guessing anymore. They were hunting. He pressed his back to the wall, holding the rifle steady. The girl's pendant, hanging loosely against his shoulder, pulsed faintly. Elias frowned. The glow was brighter than before, like a beacon. Are they tracking it? The thought twisted his gut. She wasn't just another refugee. Whatever she carried, it was worth the drones risking a city in flames to find her. The alleyway lit up. 2 drones swooped overhead, wings unfolding like steel. Their shrieks rattled the air. Spotlights flared, pinning Elias in the glow. "Hold on," he shouted. He spun out from the wall, firing in rapid bursts. Blue bolts lanced the smoke. One drone burst apart in a shower of sparks, spiraling into the ground. The second evaded, weaving with predatory speed. It let loose a barrage of energy fire, searing past Elias's shoulder. The blast lit the alley in blue fire, scorching the walls. Elias ducked, rolling behind a chunk of collapsed stone. Dust rained down. The child clung tighter, whispering her alien words soft. Terrified sounds that Elias didn't understand, but felt all the same. He peeked around the rubble. The drone hovered, its targeting beam flicking across the ruins. Then another screech split the air. More were coming. He was running out of time. The pendant glowed again. The drone's sensors locked instantly onto the light. It dove. Not today. Elias braced the rifle, aimed for its core, and fired 3 precise shots. The first 2 missed. The third caught the drone dead center. It shrieked, spiraled, and detonated in a flash that rattled the windows of the surrounding ruins. Silence, for a heartbeat, then the ground shook. The child gasped as a deafening rumble tore through the street. A building beside them groaned, then collapsed in a rain of stone and twisted steel. Elias grabbed her and leaped into the nearest opening jagged crack leading into the undercity tunnels. The collapse sealed the street behind them, dust billowing like a storm. The tunnels were dark, damp, and reeking of rust. Elias set the girl down for a moment, his rifle raised. Scanning the shadows, her pendant flickered again, casting faint light across the dripping walls. Strange symbols shimmered on its surface, reflected in her silver eyes. She touched it with trembling fingers and whispered the same word she had said before, home. Elias stared at her, the meaning striking deep. It's not just a keepsake. It's guiding her, and it's why they're hunting us. Footsteps echoed through the tunnels, metal against stone. The drones weren't done. They were adapting, hunting even in the dark. Elias tightened his grip on the rifle. He slung the child back over his shoulders, the pendant's glow painting faint starbursts on the tunnel walls. "All right, kid," he muttered, voice low but steady. "Looks like home's still a long way off." He pushed deeper into the undercity, shadows closing in, the sound of pursuit never far behind. The tunnels groaned like the throat of some ancient beast. Rusted pipes leaked streams of foul water, and every drip echoed like footsteps in the dark. Elias moved cautiously, rifle raised, the alien child clinging to his back. Behind them, the sound of pursuit still carried the distant scrape of metal, the faint whine of drone engines. The hunters weren't giving up. He stopped in a collapsed chamber, where a ceiling cave-in had left a pocket of space. Chunks of rebar jutted from the concrete like jagged teeth. He lowered the girl, pressing a finger to his lips for silence. She nodded, clutching her pendant so tightly, her knuckles turned pale violet. Elias leaned against the wall, trying to catch his breath. His HUD flickered with warnings low, vitals spiking. They couldn't keep running forever. That's when he noticed it again. The pendant. Its glow was stronger now, no longer just a faint pulse. Symbols etched into the surface shimmered, casting pale light onto the dripping walls. The girl cradled it reverently, whispering something over and over in her language. Elias crouched, curiosity pushing past exhaustion. "What is that thing, kid?" he muttered. The girl looked up at him with wide silver eyes. Slowly, she extended the pendant toward him. For a moment, Elias hesitated. Was it a trap? Some kind of beacon? But then he took it gently in his calloused hand. The reaction was instant. The pendant flared. spilling light into the chamber. A projection burst into the air, swirling constellations, a shifting star map that filled the walls and ceiling. The tunnels vanished under a sky of burning stars, coordinates glowing bright like fireflies. Ilias's mouth went dry. He wasn't looking at a trinket. He was looking at a navigation key. A star chart, encrypted with precision so advanced, no human tech could replicate it. The girl pointed to one glowing cluster, whispering a single word in halting human tongue. Home. The meaning was clear. The pendant wasn't just guiding her, it was leading her to the last sanctuary of her people. Ilias's stomach twisted. No wonder the drones wanted her. No wonder she'd been left behind, abandoned, not by accident, but because she carried something entire empires would kill to possess. Before he could speak, a sound shattered the moment. Metal footsteps. Closed. The girl's silver eyes widened in panic. The pendant's glow dimmed as she clutched it back to her chest. Elias snapped up his rifle, positioning himself between her and the echoing shadows. A drone's red targeting beam cut through the darkness, slicing across the starfield, still fading from the walls. Another beam followed, then another. They'd found them. Elias fired first. The chamber exploded with light as his rifle bolts slammed into the nearest drone, ripping it apart in a hail of sparks. The others screeched, wings unfolding, energy cannons charging with a shrill whine. He grabbed the girl, pulling her into his arms, as the wall behind them detonated under enemy fire. Shards of concrete rained down. The star map flickered one last time on the ceiling before vanishing into smoke. Elias sprinted through a jagged gap, the girl clutching his neck, the pendant glowing faintly against his chest. The hunters were closing, but so was the truth of what she carried. The tunnels spat them out into dawn. Smoke rolled across the broken skyline, the sun, a pale disk struggling through the haze. The ruins of the city stretched to the horizon, but hereat, the edge survivors moved like ghosts. A line of refugees shuffled along the shattered highway, their faces hollow with grief, their clothes caked in soot. Elias crouched in the rubble. The alien child pressed close to his side. Drones circled in the distant sky, sweeping the crowds, scanning for heat signatures. They hadn't given up. He had one chance. Hide in plain sight. Stay quiet, Elias whispered. He wasn't sure she understood, but her small hand clutched his sleeve anyway, as if promising not to let go. He adjusted his armor, smeared ash across his face, and tore off his insignia. Without his unit markers, he looked less like a soldier and more like another displaced survivor. Slinging the rifle beneath his cloak, he guided the girl toward the line of refugees. The crowd swallowed them. Children cried softly. Mothers held empty food tins. Old men limped with makeshift crutches. The stench of smoke and fear was suffocating. Elias pulled his hood low, keeping the girl close. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown. Up ahead, a checkpoint loomed. Barricades of steel and barbed wire stretched across the highway, manned by soldiers in gleaming armor. They scanned each refugee with handheld readers, tossing aside anyone who didn't pass. Ilias's throat tightened. One wrong move, and the girl would be taken or worse. The line moved painfully slow. With every step, the girl's pendant pulsed faintly against her chest, and Elias's nerves screamed. If the scanners picked up the energy signature, they were finished. Finally, it was their turn. A soldier approached, visor gleaming. His reader swept over Elias, beep green. Safe. Then it passed to the girl. The device crackled. Lights flickered. The soldier frowned, tapping the side of the reader. Glitch, he muttered. But suspicion sharpened his tone as he looked closer at the child. What's she carrying? Elias's heart hammered. His hand twitched toward his hidden rifle. A fight here would doom them all. Before he could act, the girl reached for his hand. Her small fingers slid into his, trembling but firm. She looked up at the soldier, her silver eyes wide, and whispered in broken human tongue, safe. The word was quiet, fragile, yet in that moment, it cut through the soldier's suspicion like a blade through smoke. He blinked, unsettled. The reader chirped again, this time green. "Move along," he said, waving them past. Elias didn't question the miracle. He tightened his grip on her hand, pulling her quickly through the checkpoint. The crowd pressed around them, carrying them forward until the barricades were behind and the open road ahead. Only then did Elias dare look down at her. She was still holding his hand, her gaze fixed on him with something new trust. He hadn't earned it through words, not through promises she could understand, but through every moment he had refused to leave her behind. For the first time since the bombardment began, Elias felt something shift in his chest, not hope, not yet, but a weight he was willing to carry, no matter the cost. Above them, drones circled like vultures in the smoke. They hadn't escaped, not truly. The hunt was far from over. But for now, one human and one alien child had crossed a bridge stronger than any barricade. The refugee freighter groaned as it left the poisoned atmosphere behind. Through a narrow viewport, the stars opened like a silent ocean, cold and endless. For the first time since the bombardment, Elias let himself breathe. Around him, the cargo bay was packed with huddled survivors. Families clung to one another, children cried softly, and wounded men lay against steel walls. The smell of sweat and fear filled the air. The alien child sat pressed against Elias's side, clutching her pendant beneath her cloak. She hadn't let go of him since the checkpoint. But safety was an illusion. Elias could feel the stares. Men and women, ragged and desperate, watched the faint glow of the pendant through the girl's fingers. Greed gleamed in their hollow eyes. Refugees were starving. Broken, and here was something that promised value. One man leaned closer, voice low. "What's she hiding, soldier?" Elias's hand brushed his rifle. His stare was enough to silence the man for now. But whispers spread through the cargo hold like wildfire. Treasure, power, ransom. The child sensed it too. She pressed tighter against Elias, her small hand gripping his armor. Her silver eyes searched his face, silently asking if she was still safe. He forced a calm nod, but unease coiled in his gut. Hours passed. The ship drifted in darkness, engines rumbling like a heartbeat. Elias fought exhaustion, eyes half closed, till a sudden movement snapped him awake. 3 men circled in the dim light, faces hard, weapons in hand. Survivors no longer mercenaries, in disguise. "Hand it over," one snarled, pointing at the child. "That pendant isn't just a trinket. We know what it's worth." Elias rose slowly, placing himself between them and the girl. "She's not yours. Neither is survival," the man spat. He lunged. Blaster fire erupted in the confined bay, deafening. Sparks flew as bolts ricocheted off steel walls. Refugees screamed and scattered. Pressing against the edges of the hold, Elias shoved the girl behind him and fired back, his shots precise. One mercenary fell, another staggered with a burned arm. The third grabbed for the child. She screamed, the pendant flared. Light burst through the bay like a supernova. A star map ignited in midair, stretching wall-to-wall, constellations spinning, coordinates glowing. The entire hold froze, gasping at the sight. The girl's silver eyes reflected the stars as she whispered again, voice trembling but clear, "Home." Elias's blood ran cold. Now everyone knew, not just the mercenaries, every refugee on the ship. The girl wasn't some abandoned orphan. She was the last heir to a people's survival. The pendant wasn't a trinket. It was a key to their sanctuary. The mercenaries lunged again, driven by greed. Elias fired point blank, dropping them in bursts of light and smoke. The cargo bay stank of burned ozone. Refugees huddled in silence, their fear now tangled with awe. The map faded, leaving only the pendant's faint glow. The girl collapsed into Elias's arms, Exhausted, he held her close, rifle still ready, scanning the frightened faces, watching him. None dared approach, not after what they'd seen, but in their silence. Elias heard the truth. The galaxy would not stop hunting her now, and neither would he. The freighter shook like a wounded beast. Sirens howled through its steel corridors, red lights flashing in panicked rhythm. Refugees screamed as bulkheads slammed shut. Ceiling compartments. Elias knew the soundboarding alarms. The pursuers had found them. He pulled the child close, the glow of her pendant faint against the chaos. "Stay with me," he murmured, though his voice was ragged, his body battered. His armor was cracked, ammo low, and blood seeped through a burn along his ribs. The corridor trembled. The airlock exploded inward with a scream of tearing metal. Black-armored figures stormed through drones and mercenaries, moving as one. Their rifles lit the hall with searing fire. Elias shoved the girl behind him and returned fire. Blue bolts ripped down the narrow passage, each shot calculated, each recoil jarring through his broken body. He dropped 2 enemies, but more poured in, stepping over their dead. "Run," Elias shouted. The girl froze, eyes wide with terror. He grabbed her arm, dragging her down a side corridor. Blaster bolts scorched the walls around them. Smoke filled the air, choking every breath. They burst into the escape bay. Rows of pods lined the walls, their lights flickering. Most had been launched already. Only 2 remained. Elias lifted the girl, shoving her toward one pod. She shook her head violently, clutching his armor with desperate strength. "No." Her voice cracked, broken but defiant. He knelt, gripping her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. "Listen to me. You're carrying something bigger than either of us. That pendant, that map. You can't let them have it. You must survive." Tears streamed down her violet cheeks. She didn't understand all his words, but she understood enough. She clung harder, refusing to let go. The corridor behind them erupted as mercenaries forced their way in. The air filled with smoke and screams. Elias pressed his forehead against hers for a brief, silent moment. Then, with all the strength he had left, he tore her hands free and shoved her into the pod. She pounded against the glass, her silver eyes wide with anguish. Elias hit the launch sequence. The hatch sealed with a hiss. "Safe," she whispered, her voice muffled through the glass. The pod rocketed into the void, a streak of silver against the black sea of stars. Elias turned back to face the storm. The first mercenary through the door barely had time to raise his weapon before Elias's bolt tore him down. He fought like a man already dead, every shot buying the child another heartbeat of distance. Blaster fire lit the chamber like a strobe, painting his figure in flashes of blue and red. He was outnumbered, overwhelmed, wounded, but he held the line. A bolt slammed into his shoulder, spinning him against the wall. His rifle fell empty with a hollow click. He staggered, drawing his combat knife. Teeth bared. The enemy closed in. Elias stood tall in the smoke and ruin, the last barrier between the girl and the void. He raised the blade, bloodied and defiant. "Come on," he growled, and the corridor swallowed him in fire. The council dome glittered like a jewel suspended in space. Its glass arches curved high above, reflecting the light of a dozen suns. Inside, voices of 100 species filled the chamber, an ocean of debate, power, and old grudges. Yet when she entered, silence fell. The alien child was no child anymore. She had grown into a tall, regal figure, her violet skin smooth beneath flowing silver robes. Her silver eyes, once wide with fear, now burned with steady strength. Around her neck hung the same pendant, glowing faintly against her chest. Whispers rippled through the chamber. She was no ordinary delegate. She was the last heir of her people, survivor of the bombardment, and bearer of the sanctuary's star map that had saved a scattered race. She stood at the center of the dome, hand steady as she touched the pendant. A hush settled over the crowd. "My people endured slaughter," she said, her voice carrying across the vast hall. "We endured fire, chains, and betrayal, but we survived." The pendant pulsed. Holographic constellations bloomed above her head, a starfield glowing in the chamber air. Counselors gasped, many leaning forward as they recognized the sanctuary worlds hidden within. But survival came not from weapons, not from fleets, not from politics. Her silver eyes swept the chamber, pausing on each delegation: Vakari, Athari, humans. It came from one act of defiance. One human soldier broke his orders. The chamber stilled. He found a child alone, hunted, condemned. He did not pass me by. He carried me through fire and ruin. He fought for me when all others abandoned me. He gave his life so that I could stand here today. Her voice trembled, but only with conviction. I was taught humans were dangerous, ruthless, monsters. But when the galaxy turned away, it was a human who showed me kindness. The chamber erupted shouts, arguments, disbelief. Some pounded fists against their desks. Others whispered feverishly, shaken by the revelation. The air lifted the pendant high. Its glow spilled across the dome, throwing constellations across every face. "Empires rise and fall," she continued, her voice cutting through the noise. "Armies burn, but one act of kindness endures. That soldier's sacrifice reshaped the fate of my people, and now I carry his lesson here. If humanity is to be remembered, let it not be for its wars, but for its defiance of cruelty." The dome fell silent once more. Even the most hardened warlords lowered their eyes, struck by something they could not fight: truth. Outside, beyond the council dome, the galaxy turned slowly. Fleets still clashed, empires still schemed, but in this moment, a seed had been planted. Kindness had crossed species, generations, and entire civilizations, and in the echo of that human's final stand, a future had been born. The air touched the pendant once more, her voice quiet but unshakable. His name was Elias Ward. I was the child he saved, and I will never let the galaxy forget the price he paid, or the kindness that carried me through the fire.